US President Joe Biden delivered his last State of the Union address of his current presidential term. Biden accused his arch-rival Donald Trump of threatening US democracy as he made his pitch for 4 more years in the White House. Biden's speech touched upon the key issues including economy, reproductive rights and abortion. He also mentioned the 2020 fund January 6th Capitol rights, along with other issues like the migrant crisis, gun control, along with the wars in Ukraine and West Asia as well. Joe Biden ended his speech by addressing the issue of his age. Israel marked 5 months of the deadly October 7th attack that saw Hamas militants rampaging a rave festival, killing and kidnapping people. Families of the victims and hostages visited the site on Thursday to remember the slain people and the hostages still in Hamas's captivity inside the Gaza Strip. The Hamas's October 7th attack sparked a full-scale war in the Gaza Strip between the Israeli armed forces and the Palestinian militants. Hamas militants killed 1,200 people in Israel and also abducted 253 on October 7th. In response, Israel carried out an armed offensive on Gaza that has so far killed over 30,800 people, according to Gaza's health ministry. It has also forced nearly all of its 2 million inhabitants away from their homes. Several Israelis staged protests outside the Defense Ministry headquarters in Tel Aviv, where Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu was convening the war cabinet. They chanted slogans and carried posters of 133 hostages still held by Hamas militants in Gaza. The protesters also called for the immediate release of hostages. Hamas militants reportedly abducted 253 people on October 7th. Almost half of them were released during a brief truce in the month of November last year. Israel, in return, released hundreds of Palestinian prisoners. Three Palestinian women in Israel are in detention and are claimed that the forces had mistreated them in ways that included stripping, beating, restraining hands and legs in painful ways. Israel has detained an undisclosed number of Palestinian men and women in Gaza since it began its military offensive on October 7th in response to Hamas militants' attack. Notably, some women alleged being subjected to degrading treatment in detention centers. Some cases were recorded in detail by non-governmental human rights groups, including Israel's B'Tselem and the Palestinian Center for Human Rights. France airdropped humanitarian aid over the Gaza Strip on Thursday in the 5th such operation. Famine looms over Gaza as sharply curtailed aid supplies have dwindled. Large parts of the territory are cut off from food and other essentials. The Gaza Health Ministry said that 2 Palestinians aged 15 and 72 died of dehydration and malnutrition in Al-Shifa and Kamal Adwan Hospital on March 6th, raising the toll in just over a week to 20. The Israel-Hamas conflict could spread in the West Asia region, especially after a series of attacks on vessels in the Red Sea and Gulf of Aden by Iran-affiliated Houthi militias claiming solidarity with the Palestinians. The United Arab Emirates Ministry of Defense released a video on Thursday showing its 4th airdrop of humanitarian aid into northern Gaza. The operation was a joint effort with the Egyptian Air Force. In a post on social media, UAE's Ministry of Defense said that it included 53 tons of food and medical aid for the civilian population, bringing the total humanitarian supplies to 169 tons. Civilians in the Gaza Strip are bearing the brunt of Israel's armed offensive. According to Gaza's health ministry, over 30,800 people have been killed so far. The Jordanian military on Thursday carried out more airdrops of humanitarian assistance over the Gaza Strip as hunger worsened in the war-torn territory. While aid groups say that all of Gaza is mired in a humanitarian crisis, the situation in the largely isolated north stands out. Over 300,000 people are consuming animal fodder in order to survive. According to the United Nations, 1 in 6 children younger than 2 in northern Gaza is suffering from acute malnutrition. Sweden joined the NATO alliance in Washington, D.C. on Thursday, 2 years after Russia's invasion of Ukraine. The war forced Sweden to rethink its national security policy and decide that support for NATO was the Scandinavian nation's best guarantee of security. Swedish Prime Minister handed over the final documents to the US government on Thursday, marking the final step in a lengthy process to secure the support of all members to join the military alliance. Sweden's entry into the NATO alliance comes as a blow to Russian President Vladimir Putin and his country, who has sought to prevent further strengthening of the alliance. After joining the NATO alliance, Swedish Prime Minister said that his country is a safer country, and that is today than it was ever and yesterday. He added that Sweden's and Finland's accession into NATO showed Russian President Vladimir Putin had failed in his objective to determine the choices made by other nations. Sweden became the 32nd nation to enter the NATO alliance. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky approved the candidacy of former army chief Valery Zaluzhny as ambassador to Britain. Now, Zaluzhny, who is widely seen as a national hero for overseeing Ukraine's war efforts throughout the Russian invasion, was replaced just last month by Ground Forces Commander Alexander Syrsky. Zelensky said that priority areas of cooperation were boosting air defenses, long-range weapons artillery, and joint production of weapons, and bringing Moscow to account. British Defence Secretary Grant Shapps visited Kiev on Thursday. The visit was shared in a social media post by Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. The post said, and I'm quoting, "Ukraine's primary focus is on bolstering air defence, long-range capabilities and meeting other urgent needs for weapons and ammunition." London has said that it will increase its spending on drones for Ukrainian armed forces by $160 million, raising the total number of drones supplied to over 10,000. Britain's support comes at a crucial time for Ukraine in the 2-year war, as vital US military aid has stalled. UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres has urged the warring parties in Sudan to halt hostilities during the holy month of Ramadan. The Security Council is negotiating a British drafted resolution that would also call for a truce for Ramadan. The nearly year-long war between the Sudanese army and paramilitary rapid support forces, 10 to 15,000 people were killed in Sudan's West Darfur region since the last year. According to a UN Sanctions Monitor report, the ethnic war erupted on April 15th last year. . Chinese President Xi Jinping on Thursday urged the armed forces to forge a stronger sense of mission, deepen reform and promote innovation. Xi made the remarks at the plenary meeting of the second session of the 14th National People's Congress. Xi said that strategic capabilities in emerging areas are an important part of national strategies. He also called for a national rejuvenation effort through Chinese modernization. China's top legislators promised new laws to safeguard the country's sovereign interests. Speaking to a 170-member National People's Congress Standing Committee in Beijing, committee chairperson and the Communist Party's third-ranked official said that improvements were being made to legislation to safeguard national security. The NPCSC also pledged to expand interactions with foreign parliaments this year, including hosting seminars in China for foreign parliamentarians and their staffer members. Hong Kong security chief unveiled a proposed security law on Friday. The bill is seen as the latest step in a crackdown on political opposition that began after the city witnessed violent pro-democracy protests in the year 2019. Lawmakers are set to debate on it on Friday afternoon after the law is expected to pass in the next few weeks. The proposed law will expand the government's power to stamp challenges to its rule, targeting espionage and disclosing state secrets. Under the law, people would be jailed for 20 years or life for damaging public infrastructure. In the year 2019, protesters occupied the airport and vandalized railway stations. US-based rights activists say that North Korea's border closings and other anti-pandemic measures were overbroad, excessive and unnecessary. In a report, they claim that closing several affected food security and the availability of essential products. As the pandemic gripped the world in 2020, Kim Jong-un's regime embarked on a massive exercise to seal its borders with China and Russia. Some of the restrictions remain. Pyongyang has only recently allowed more access to foreign diplomats and increased trade with Russia and China. According to the Seoul-based media, North Korea has continued to block access by foreign aid workers despite allowing visits by Russian tourists and Chinese trade delegations. Six people from Sri Lanka, including a mother and 4 young children, were knifed to death in the Canadian capital of Ottawa. That happened late on Wednesday. The crime has shocked a country where mass murders are rare. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau said that he was horrified by the terrible tragedy. The police said that Fabrizio De Zoisa, a 19-year-old male student from Sri Lanka, was charged with 6 counts of first-degree murder and 1 count of attempted murder. The police said that De Zoisa was known to the family and was living in the house. The dead victims are a 35-year-old woman and her children aged 7, 4, 2 and 2 months, and a 40-year-old male acquaintance of the family. Ottawa Police Chief called it a senseless act of violence perpetrated on purely innocent people. Gunmen kidnapped dozens of students in northern Nigeria on Thursday, and the incident is the biggest abduction targeting a school since the year 2021. Police in Kaduna State did not immediately comment on the abductions that took place shortly after morning assembly at the local government education authority school in the town of Kuriga. Parents of the students said that the gunmen started shooting before abducting dozens of students and disappearing into the bush. Former Fox and News Corporation chairperson Rupert Murdoch got engaged to his girlfriend, Elena Zukova. The wedding will be held in California at Murdoch's vineyard and estate Moraga. Zukova is a 67-year-old retired molecular biologist from Moscow, whom Murdoch began dating this summer. Murdoch stepped down from his role last September, ending a 7-decade career that began at his father's Australian newspaper business and culminated in one of the most influential media empires. The dollar's 1% fall for the week this far is set to be its steepest in nearly 3 months, and tonight's US jobs data is the next test for the greenback. It would take a very strong number to change the outlook for US rates, given how Federal Reserve Chair has already opened the door to cutting rates, even if unemployment stays low, as long as inflation continues to slow. The dollar has thus this far been the clearest reflection of the easing expectations, with its recent move lower and buoyant risk sentiment hoisting the Aussie back above the $0.6 level. The euro too is at a 2-month high and eyeing its best week against the dollar in months. Oil prices rose today, driven by growing demand in the world's biggest consumers, the United States and China, while the US Federal Reserve gave a positive signal on the possibility of rate cuts. Data from the Energy Information Administration showed that US gasoline inventories fell 4.5 million barrels last week, and distillate stockpile were down 4.1 million barrels. Both fell more than expected in a sign of strong demand. In China, imports of crude oil rose 5.1% in the first 2 months of 2024 from a year earlier. And India's fuel consumption increased 5.7% in February on this year amid strong factory activity in the world's 3rd largest oil importer and consumer.